Alright, let's just talk about a bunch of TTRPG systems for sci-fi that I have been recommended, picked up. This is in no way a comprehensive list, but I'm going to give a brief rundown because for some reason today, I decided to drink an entire pot of coffee and go through all of my sci-fi TTRPGs. I don't know. Yeah. Now, these aren't comprehensive. I have definitely not played every single one of these. A lot of them I actually got in my time at Gen Con, and I have not had the time to be able to sit down and actually get a game going. But I am going to give you a brief synopsis of what the system is like, kind of what you're setting yourself up for, the genre expectations and whatnot. And again, it's not comprehensive, but it's what I've got. Okay, first off, real quick, Spelljammer. This is 5e in space with their very particular setting through a very particular lens. It is going to lean in more on the buddy kind of goofy humor in space. Yeah, Spelljammer just isn't really my personal taste, and I don't think that these books are as well executed as they necessarily could be. I think that there is actually a 5e in space book, and not really sponsored or endorsed, but the guys at Mayhem Press did give me a copy of this book, and that is Dark Matter. Dark Matter to me is everything that Spelljammer wanted to be and couldn't quite live up to the hype. There are more comprehensive rules in here for space warfare, for a setting that is a bit more homebrewed. I think the Spelljammer stuff, it definitely carries the pastiche, the old aesthetics of what we had with former D&D stuff, whereas Dark Matter kind of roots itself a bit more into the grounded, I say grounded, the more traditional fantasy elements, right? It's not really afraid to get into a bit more of the horror side of it, and it does so in a much more, I think, knows what it's doing style way than you get over in Spelljammer, that it seems to be remembering all of a sudden, oh, we had all the funny stuff, and now we have to get to the cosmic horror. Yeah. Like I said, Dark Matter, Mayhem Press, fantastic sci-fi fantasy book. And if you like 5e and maybe you want something that isn't quite so fantastical, a bit more rooted into reality, I guess, maybe you feel that the superhero fantasy isn't quite for you and you want something a bit more grounded, well, that's where I'm going to recommend Stars Without Number by Kevin Crawford. Really, the big difference here is if you know how to play 5e, you're pretty close to this already. The big difference is the numbers are going to be, I guess, the calculations overall for what it means to have your attribute score convert over into a modifier. All those numbers are a bit more kind of crunched together. I think you are going to get the same kind of elements and very similar characters to what you would get over in 5e, but with a bit more reeled back power overall. Another one I got during my time at Gen Con, this is one that has been recommended to me like crazy, is Traveler by Mongoose Publishing. Okay, so Traveler feels a bit more slice of life in a way. I think that this is going to get in on the maybe like Firefly style fantasy, right? There is a class system in here. It's actually a D6 based system. Feels like you're doing a lot more 2d6 based rolling in here, but there are variations on that. It doesn't just stick to the 2d6 itself. Do not let the bulk of this thing intimidate you. They do try to be a bit comprehensive in regards to what may come up at the table or what are some options for you to potentially do with your spaceship, your character, your weapons, what the hell ever. They do leave a pretty wide palette for you to keep putting colors of paint on here. If I were going to give a bit of a metaphor here, it would be, Spelljammer, Dark Matter, and probably Stars Without Numbers feels a bit more Star Wars, whereas Traveler feels a lot more Star Trek. We have much more human characters where they are less defined by their overall powers and more just about what you do to create them, kind of what their relationships are going to be like with other characters. So if you're more into the roleplay side of it and you do want less of the crazy fantastical, power of the force and all that kind of stuff, Traveler could very well be the system for you. Last year, as I was considering what would be kind of a cool, more kids on bike style Stranger Things TTRPG, I did look at some other systems like Kids on Bikes and Monster of the Week, but nothing really quite hit, I guess, this resonant feeling of uniqueness and voice quite like Tales from the Loop. Imagine it's like this. It's the 1980s and there has been some sort of a scientific discovery or an anomaly break out, and whatever this thing was is affecting the nearby town and its populace, and you're just sort of exploring these situations that are occurring. And the horror itself comes from the fact that your life may be either lost or unbelievably changed in a way that you cannot revert. This does lean in on a lot more of the existential horror kind of thematic of what they're trying to evoke with Tales from the Loop. I would recommend that you check out the live action series so that you get a bit more of the aesthetic of what this is going for, but I've heard about the series causing some like existential dread in people, so just be aware before you kind of get into it that that's the kind of theme that this show is going to lean in really hard on. One of the things I think I appreciate most about Tales from the Loop is it's not afraid to just embrace the idea that characters very well cannot be changed at times. Characters may be stuck in some of these philosophical crises where like we really cannot do anything about their current situation, right? Someone freezes time with a special device, and then while time is frozen, they break the device and everything is stopped. What happens in a situation like that, right? This is the kind of sci-fi that Tales from the Loop is trying to explore, rather than the we're gonna go shoot everything with lasers style. Anyways, there's all kinds of supplements out there for this one. If that does sound like something that interests you, I highly encourage that you check it out. Free League is like one of my favorite publishers, if not my absolute favorite publisher in the entire world. Now that we kind of eased into it with Dread, let's go full on horror now. This is going to be the big fight, I think, in the comment sections right here. What do I prefer? Mothership or Death in Space? Mothership, or as my buddy Crow calls it, Mom Boat, is a 2d10 system, kind of similar to Call of Cthulhu. Mothership does feel like it's embracing a bit more of the survival, sort of slow burn elements of a horror story. Whereas over here with Death in Space, we're going for the more short burst sort of scenarios that can occur. If you've ever played Merkborg, you're probably going to get that kind of experience over there. I think both of these have a very similar experience. If you're looking for that more slow burn, I think that Mothership could do a lot for you. This is, like I said, I think it's D100 roll under, if I'm remembering that right. And then over here with Death in Space, I am a sucker for the Merkborg system. It is very much based on Into the Odd. That one's by Chris McDowell, if you haven't checked that one out. I'm not saying that one is necessarily better than the other. I'm just saying right now, at least my preference is really leaning in towards Death in Space. But if you've played Merkborg, this is going to feel quite familiar. This is a D20 roll higher than 12 based system. I personally just feel a bit more familiar and more at home with systems like these. I think if I were told, yeah, you've got to get something together tonight for us to play, I'm honestly probably going to go with Death in Space over Mothership. And that's simply just because I'm going to feel a lot more at home in this system. The math, dice, all that stuff, I feel like I would just know instantly what to call for here. That's just a familiarity thing. I think that Mothership is, not that I would say that this is a problem, but there is a lot more modularity to it, whereas Death in Space, it feels like, yeah, this is a bit more for one-shot horror scenarios. This is for more like a long, sort of slow burn sci-fi horror. Another one I want to make mention of here at the very end, I did see this at Gen Con. I haven't got a chance to actually play it myself, but that is the Alien role-playing game by Free League. It is using their Year Zero engine, so if you checked out Forbidden Lands or Mutant Year Zero or Tales from the Loop, it is going to be a very similar system to that. Now, if one of these was going to reign supreme for me, I think it is going to be a little bit of a tie right here, because to me right now, I'm all about this style right here, Death in Space. I'm a huge sucker for the Stockholm Cartel and Free League guys. Everything that they've written so far has just resonated so much with me. I already know the Merkborg system, and so this feels like a real easy one to jump in and pilot. Although I do definitely want to check out Mothership at some point. But if I am going for a bit more of the, I guess, 5e feel to a 5e feel to fantasy and sci-fi here, the book, you need to go check this one out. It's as good as an official book, I promise you. Dark Matter by Mage Hand Press. Please go check this one out. Yeah. Anyways, that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope that this is a short one after I get done with editing, but thank you so much to my Patreon sponsors for helping me keep the lights on around here and coffee in my blood. You all are absolute heroes. And hey, thank you all so much for being here. I hope you all are staying safe, staying healthy, and see you in the next one.